over. Me too. We have handouts, and as I pass these out, I did set the printer to double-sided print, and it didn't do it. So I felt it was better to use these than reprint. So since they're single-sided, I apologize. But if you guys maybe want to take one or two for your rows and then pass them back. I only did 20, which was a severe underestimation. Oh, sorry, Andy, sorry. But that's just the roadmap that we're going to talk about in more detail today. So folks want to look at it, pass it to their neighbor, share those, and then if anyone's super interested, they can take them home. And he said the last one quicker. Okay. Where is Audrey? Well, here goes to find Audrey. My name is Kim Schlaepfer. Thanks for being here. I work for a company called Lotus Engineering and Sustainability. I'm based out of Avon, Colorado, in Eagle County, and I'm really excited to share the work that we've been doing with a group of regional communities in my area of the Colorado Mountains. And I'm just going to wait until my co-presenter Kira comes back so she can introduce herself. Today's session is about road mapping to get to net zero new construction. And so sorry, I'm just tracking my MUTs back there to make sure the slides come up. Yeah, so this project was really about trying to understand in our Colorado context, what does it mean when we say we have climate goals to get to net zero new construction building codes by 2030? What do we mean when we say net zero? In Colorado's specific context is unique compared to some of our other mountain communities, so we're excited to hear what other challenges folks or considerations folks outside of Colorado are thinking. And then really, I think the big theme that we want to touch on today is collaboration, which I think was a really big theme throughout our keynote this morning, that peer-to-peer learning. That was like a foundational element of the work that we were doing with our communities, was to get everybody to be sharing lessons learned and collaborating as peers across our networks. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Kira to introduce herself.
Thanks, Kim. Actually, I don't know if my mic is working. It's working. Great. I'm Kira with the Town of Eagle, and we're one of the communities that participated in this Net Zero Roadmap project. So I'm just going to pepper in a little bit of our experience throughout.
Awesome. So our presentation today, we have a lot of questions hidden throughout. We kind of want to make it interactive as we go through the presentation. So we'll have lots of opportunities for you guys to give us your input, and then as you have questions throughout the presentation, certainly raise your hand, and then if there's time at the end, we should have some time for Q&A. So, this is a question I wanted to start with. I know that our mountain communities really differ across the board in states that have a minimum or a maximum, I guess in some cases, state energy code, or those that have home rule. So I wanted to ask, if you are a home rule state, meaning each local government picks their own energy code, raise your hand. Okay. If you are a state minimum code, or the state sets the energy code, raise your hand. All right, cool. So we got a lot of state energy code folks here. So we'll try as much as possible to make the work and the foundation of our work applicable to all states, not just Colorado states. But we wanted just to start to see if we had the room.
Okay, and so our first question here, and if you guys want to just sort of popcorn around and answer it, is what is the biggest challenge that you face with code adoption? To kick things off, I'll just start and say that the Town of Eagle, I think for us, we've got a pretty small staff. And so we've had one building official, one permit tech. We were down an inspector this year, and we just didn't necessarily have the capacity to be looking at stricter codes and how we would enforce that. So that was our challenge. Let's go for it.
The state.
Yes.
Community buy-in, and by that I mean builders who are reticent to change.
Awesome. Well, yes.
Cost. So here in Jackson, code was done to re-insulate, meet the new codes.
Cost, big one that always comes up. Yes.
along with that, affordability, maintaining affordability.
Absolutely. And can I ask a follow-up question on that? When you mean affordability, upfront home affordability or ongoing affordability?
Both, really.
Okay.
Construction.
Absolutely. Okay, thanks.
I think aesthetics and character conflicting with unit sizes, number of units for community housing.
Okay. Awesome. Great challenge. Yeah?
The extraordinary amount of building departments, let's say just in Colorado, and all their interpretations of code.
Yes. Great.
Really strong community fear of exceeding the state code, fear of electrification due to power outages.
Okay. Awesome. All of these challenges sound like things that we heard in our cohort, and definitely I think across the board as folks work on new energy codes, cost, builder buy-in, community buy-in, how it fits into the community aesthetic, fear of new technology and what it's going to mean, all are super important and can be real barriers to moving forward with newer and advanced codes. So we also want to understand who's in the room today. And so I'm just going to do name things, and if you're one of these people, raise your hand. So who is one of our municipal sustainability folks? Raise your hand. Okay. Do we have any municipal building department folks in the room? Nice, we got one. All right, what about elected officials? All right, a lot of decision makers, awesome. Who else was on my list? Building industry, not the building department, but our building industry folks. Awesome, okay. And then, who else? If I didn't call which you are.
HOA dude, I'm the HOA dude.
Public Works, okay. Utility, awesome.
Nonprofits.
Okay. What else we got?
Nonprofit.
Nonprofit. Got it. Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, good to know who's in the room and who we're speaking to. So thanks for sharing. So we're going to go into a little bit of project background first. And so I wanted to give a little bit of context. If any of you saw me last year at the in Mountain Towns in Vail, I presented with Eric Place, who is the Avon Building Code official, and we were talking about our process to get Eagle County communities, which is Vail, Avon, Minturn, Eagle, Basalt, Gypsum, and Eagle County, all on the same building code. And this was an effort to really try to get all of them to adopt the 2021, the latest at the time, the 2021 IECC Energy Code, and a set of consistent supporting amendments that would drive our community towards our climate goals. And so I just wanted to give a quick update on that, because really that was the project that led into the project that we'll be talking about today. And through that effort, we have Avon, Eagle, Minturn, and Eagle County on the exact same building code, which for those of you who work in building departments, who work in the building industry, in Colorado, that is not very common. And so we feel very, very proud that we were able to do that. Vail is on the same 2021 IECC. They did a slightly different set of stretch amendments. And then our friends Gypsum and Basalt are kind of in the same space, but did not quite follow along with the cohort, which is okay. They participated in all the meetings. But really, I wanted to share this because this effort was really what led into this road mapping effort. And so we got all of the building code officials, sustainability folks together, and we said, let's get on the same code. Once we got there, we were like, okay, we've taken this first step to achieving our climate goals as they relate to building code. In Eagle County, we have a climate goal that the county has adopted, all the municipalities have adopted, that is to reach an all-electric or a net zero code by 2030. So in this space, we took the first step, and we were like, from here, how do we carry this collaborative momentum forward to make sure that over the next few code adoption cycles, we're maintaining regional consistency and we're hitting that goal together. I think Kira will share this later. I think there's at least in Colorado, a hesitation from some communities, especially small mountain towns, to be the one that sticks their neck out first to try to do something like a net zero code without a community going along with them. So that was a really important piece. For funding for this, Colorado Energy Office, for our Colorado peeps in the room, has a ton of money to spend on getting communities to adopt new code standards and updated code standards. And so we worked with the Colorado Energy Office to get non-grant funding for this, which was really rare, and we feel very lucky. that was really driven in large part by our nonprofit partners in the region. So we have three, I'm going to show you a map here soon, but there are 3 counties. So we've got Eagle County, Pitkin County, and Garfield County. And each one of those is served by a nonprofit that really focuses on sustainability and energy. And these 3 nonprofits have a long history of working together and collaborating on regional climate solutions. And so it was because of the work of Walking Mountains, I'd say primarily, working with the Energy Office, they were able to secure this funding from the Colorado Energy Office to pursue this regional roadmap to net zero construction. And so really the funding that came from CEO was for a project manager, which was Lotus. We've worked with towns across the US, and we did the last project with these folks, and to bring in technical cold consultants, so we had that level of realism on whatever we were trying to do, and technical support. So that was really awesome. So, as I mentioned, the first effort was with Eagle County communities. And this is me who drew this blue line, so don't judge my artistic ability, and if you live in these valleys, this might not be how the river goes. But, the point is, there is a mountain valley here, a mountain valley here, and then the Colorado River goes whoop, all the way here. So, there's a big thing of mountains right here, and I make that point and I share that point because while these county lines might make sense if you're looking at a map like this, when you look at the geography of our region, these county lines make no sense at all. And so in this river valley, you have 3 counties all touching each other that all have different codes and standards in place. And so when we went to the Energy Office to say, Eagle County wants to go for more funding to do this roadmap to net zero, the state was like, well, that's nice, but can you expand the reach of this effort? Can you bring in more regional partners? And really try to figure out, get some alignment across these 3 regions where there is so much overlap, geographically wise. And so that's how we ended up expanding. And so the focus of our project was really this river valley to Glenwood Springs, and this river valley to Glenwood Springs. We invited Garfield County communities to join us. For those who are familiar with Colorado, the further west you go, it typically gets a little bit more red, a little bit more conservative. And so while we invited all these communities in, and we had some good participation from staff at those communities, they did not, those staff members were not confident that their councils would drive any of this forward. And so we really focused our effort in the Eagle County, in that little piece of Garfield that's there. And so then just a little bit more helpful context on this project. As I shared, Colorado is a home rule state. So Eagle, Pitkin, and Garfield County communities, we share a workforce, we share river valleys, we share, just like many mountain towns who are here, challenges with affordable housing versus luxury developments. And importantly, we share electric utility companies. Our 3 counties do not share, for the most part, or did not, consistent building codes, or consistent political views or approaches on what it means to advance sustainability in building codes. And so what we had found when we started this project and looked across our region is that we had very different approaches to net zero, from Aspen to Pitkin County to Vail to Eagle. Everyone was kind of taking a different approach. And so that led itself into some important steps we have to take in the project, which we'll talk about in a second. So this is who participated. And we held, in order to kind of create this roadmap, we held a series of, we had a kickoff workshop that was 3 hours in person. I will say that I think that was a really important step. Building code officials in particular like to see people in person. The virtual thing can be really challenging. So it was really great to get everybody in a room and get everybody really aligned on what we were doing. And then we had 6 virtual sessions with everybody else to build this roadmap, to build what we were talking about. So here's our list of communities that participated. We also had, importantly, utility participation. We knew that as we were building a net zero roadmap, engagement with our electric utilities was super critical. And Kiri's going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then the technical experts we had advising the project. Shums Coda is a well-known code expert in the state of Colorado. They do a ton of work with supporting communities navigating energy code. Southwest Energy Efficiency Project, SWEEP, might be familiar with a couple of you guys. They do a lot of policy support in our state. And then Biospaces Consulting was a Pitkin County local building code consulting.
Okay, so we wanted to pose this next question for you all to think about the local governments near you, and if you have the same energy code or motivations for the same energy code. I know for several of you, which you mentioned about not being home rule state, you probably already know the answer, but just consider that as we move along in the presentation. Okay, so the first thing that this collaborative group needed to do was sort of redefine what our goals were and the purpose. And so Kim has shared the purpose is to align on future building code. And so the first goal of that, like I just mentioned, was to redefine what net zero use really means, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. The next really important piece was to eliminate operational greenhouse gas emissions, to also provide a clear pathway for local leaders, elected officials, and staff in order to implement these codes successfully, including compliance. And then lastly, to support ongoing collaboration, because this effort is really great to get everybody in the room, get on the same page, but if we can't move forward together and continue on our path to full net zero, then we're not really reaching our full potential.
Oh, this is me next. Cool. One thing actually I wanted to add on this, it was not an explicit goal of our process, but I thought one thing that was kind of underlying the whole effort is that a lot of our building code officials in the region, we talk about net zero in the sustainability space a lot. We all in the sustainability space know what that means, and we know what we are trying to achieve. When you start to talk to building code officials, they don't live in the sustainability space. And so part of these meetings and these discussions and conversations were to get building code officials and building department staff more comfortable with the verbiage that is sustainability, that is energy storage, that is solar and electrification, right? And to let them ask questions in a safe space that furthered their understanding so then they could better understand to move all of this forward in the end. So why regional consistency? The big reason here is workforce, but also compliance, right? If you have to jump like 10 feet that way is a different code than 10 feet this way, the idea that the builder is going to know how to comply with the two different codes, know all the ins and outs of that, is a pretty big ask. We have a HERS consultant in the region who came to one of our workforce sessions to share this project, and he was like, I have a binder this thick with all the code standards that I need to know for each individual jurisdiction because everybody's on a different code. Everybody follows a different pathway. And in each building, this jurisdiction, each department, they are enforcing different elements of the code. So like the regional consistency piece is incredibly important when you start to think about, are the buildings we're actually trying to get built through code delivering, like, are they as sustainable as the code is telling them to be? So this is my fun example. This is Avon, for those who know the region. I live here, and in this red square, this is unincorporated Eagle County. And up until currently, and until January 1, we are on the 2015 Energy Code. Here. This, right here, all of this, is the town of Avon. And last year, they adopted the 2021 code, plus an electric preferred amendment, plus electric readiness, plus solar readiness. And so, if you're a builder working on my complex, and then you jump across the river and you're working here, again, you're in different codes. And I just really wanted to put it on a map because I just think it's one thing to talk about it, but it's one thing to think that my neighbor's home could be 10% less efficient than my home, or my home is going to be 10% less efficient than my neighbor's home, just because of where our street address is landed, right? So we, as part of this project, we built the roadmap with the communities, and then we shared the roadmap with our workforce, and we wanted to say, are we going in the right direction? Is this what you guys need? And also share with us your perspectives around regional consistent codes. And so these are just quotes that I pulled from the people that came to our sessions around the importance of regional consistency. And so these are all coming from our building industry workforce. that folks are really wanting this to happen. And so I think one of the big things is like, how do we translate this need from the workforce up to our elected officials who all want to have their cute, unique stamp on building codes? So, thanks for bringing.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what other benefits there are for having regionally aligned codes, in addition to those that Kim just mentioned. For the town of Eagle, specifically, we sort of mentioned this earlier, but we don't always like to be the very first on the bleeding edge, despite the fact that we have an extremely aggressive net zero by 2030 goal and by 2028. We still want to have some things to be vetted, and knowing that we're in this collaborative space where all these towns are signing on at once gives our staff and our elected leaders a lot more confidence that we're going to be successful in the implementation of things such as this code.
So I guess I would love to pose this question to you all. What do you guys think is the benefit? And for those of you who live in states where there is consistent code requirements, what are the benefits of having those consistent code requirements? Yeah,
You're holding everybody to the same standards.
absolutely.
If you're building, I mean, it's not Texas, you have to do it the right type of way, so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Consistent enforcement,
Totally.
and then maybe less pushback from HVA.
Yes, that is a huge concern for Colorado communities trying to move forward code, yeah.
You can share a lot of education, just in training up the workforce, building officials, contractors, etc.
Absolutely. Like that peer learning piece, super important. Makes it available. Cool.
Okay, so we're going to get into the meat of that first goal, which is redefining net zero, making sure we're all explaining things and talking the same language. Okay, so one really important thing that we had to consider as a group moving into this work was our electric utilities renewable energy commitments, goals, and requirements. So you can see on the screen that pretty much every electric utility in our region already has or has met some sort of renewable energy goal. So this really comes into play when we think about how we're defining net zero and what that language is that we're all using together.
This is a fun question that we wanted to ask the audience because I think as you look at a classic definition of net zero, it is you can build whatever you want to build and then you put renewable on your roof to offset your energy use of your home. Can a home or building be net zero if it has gas in it? Raise your hand if you think yes.
What's the gas for?
Stove
or heating?
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
Do offsets count? No.
That would be your definition of net zero. So yes, it would. Yeah. So if you think gas is part of the equation, okay. If you think gas cannot be part of the equation to get to net zero, raise your hand. Okay. Awesome.
Perfect. So if we look at this balance and we're thinking about the place of natural gas and we're understanding that the utilities in our region have to have renewable energy that's supporting their portfolio, how can we offset the gas when they're already being renewable? How does that have a place in this balance?
And I think the big challenge that we saw is that there is no direct offset for natural gas in a net zero context if you're looking at a building level. And so you can offset the electricity you use in your building with PV panels that produce electricity on your roof, but how are you getting that offset for the natural gas, right? And so that was, I think, a really key and critical question that we had to ask ourselves as a cohort.
So this brings us to the way that we define a net zero building is with the following attributes. And so we're looking at this as the ideal end state of that building by 2030. So this is a building that is powered by electricity, hence the earlier comment about the electric utilities moving to all renewable. But there's also an option to use renewable energy from the grid and or on-site generation, as Kim mentioned. Has the ability to store energy and or shift energy loads to reduce peak demand. Also achieves energy performance above the base energy code. And is designed to minimize embodied carbon and accommodate electric vehicles.
And so I just wanted to add some color to this slide because this list of attributes was not easy to come by. We were dealing with, like I said, communities that have very different approaches to net zero and very different thoughts and political views around what net zero means, trust in the electric grid, trust in what we could achieve with a building that looks like this. And so of those 6 meetings that I shared with you, about 4 of them were coming up with this consensus-based definition of a building. And so this was, but basically we were like, before we build a roadmap to figure out what our end state, to how to get to our end goal, we need to understand as a region, what's our end goal? What are we actually trying to get to? And through a lot of discussion, a lot of rewriting these bullets over and over and over again in different ways, we got there, and we got consensus across all of our participants on this definition. Yeah.
Having come from Breckenridge, I know that those counties don't have any heavy industry that requires loads that immediately cannot meet. So it's easy for you to go there because your customers don't need a big swing load, which we really can't meet today.
Absolutely, and as we get into the roadmap, you'll see that there was really intentional call-outs for exceptions where it is appropriate for that first bullet right there. And I do want to call out that gypsum does have some heavy industry. The gypsum wallboard plant from American Wallboard is in gypsum. And as we get to Garfield County, there is certainly a lot more industry. But then I also think it's really important to remember we're talking about new construction. And so that was a really big piece of what we needed to make sure everyone was clear on is we're not saying that every building in the Superior County region is going to be this by 2030 that exists already today, but that once we start building new in 2030, we want all of our buildings to be like this. Yeah.
You just specified it was new construction. What is the definition of new construction? So if somebody takes a house down to just a few studs and then completely rebuilds it, is that a remodel? So where's the gray line there?
So the building code, for those who are familiar with it, the energy code in particular draws a pretty clear line on when the energy code applies or does not apply to a renovation project. And so if it's a renovation of, I think, 50% more of the floor area or greater, a lot of the energy code requirements kick in because the idea with the existing building renovation part of the code is that you fix what you touch. So if I open up this wall, the energy code says you have to bring that wall up to the insulation values of the current code. But if I don't touch that wall, I don't have to do anything with that wall. If I touch the lighting fixtures, I have to bring it up to the code minimum. But if I don't touch electrical, I don't have to mess with any of that. So it really depends on the scope of the project. But for the example you gave, I would say that this code would apply in that case. Yeah.
So understanding that new construction is inherently wasteful and not very sustainable, how do you quantify and minimize embodied carbon?
I was wondering if someone would ask about that. So I think this bullet in particular was one that is an emphasis of some of our communities that I think are driving, have, let's say, more funding and resources to start thinking beyond operational carbon and into embodied carbon. Like the city of Aspen, for example, has been trying to figure out how to address embodied carbon for a long time in the new construction. And so this bullet was added as a bullet for future intent. Like, we don't know, the roadmap doesn't necessarily touch on this right now, but we didn't want to miss it because, right, if we're reaching this end state of a building in 2030 that has zero operational carbon emissions, then the question shifts to, well, what do we do about embodied? So we just wanted to make sure it was a note in this roadmap, but we don't really have any, I mean, there are some ways to address that, but that's not necessarily captured in this.
So do you use that to argue for adaptive reuse versus new construction then? You've already got a structure that has embodied carbon if you do a renovation versus new build.
It could be adaptive reuse, it could be using low carbon materials like lower carbon steel or lower carbon concrete. It could be paying attention to environmental product declarations for different products that you're buying for the building. I think there's a lot of ways to slice and dice it. Yeah.
This may be slightly off topic, but knowing that you had stakeholders that were from the utilities as part of this program, was there an exercise to forecast out energy demand if these codes go into place and all of this energy needs to be derived from energy from the utilities?
It's That's a good question. And so there is, I would say in our region, there's a pretty small sustainability community. We work a lot. And Holy Cross Energy, we have a board member present, is I think one of the like leading in the nation in co-ops pursuing renewable energy supply. They have been very active in front of our councils, in front of our commissioners, in trying to drive towards electrification, and we've asked the utilities over and over again, what's going to happen to demand? That is an ongoing question, an ongoing concern. And Holy Cross has said over and over again, we're not worried, bring it on. And I'll let Adam add any color to that if he wants, not to put you on the spot, Adam. But yeah, I think the message that we've heard from the utility is that's they're not anticipating such a spike in electric demand that this would not be feasible. Anyone have anything? Sure. Yeah, please.
Yeah, so I'm on the Holy Cross board, and I'd make 2 points. The first one is in terms of communication, sort of in parallel with the process that Kim's talking about, what we've been doing, and more specifically our CEO's been doing, is either reactively or proactively talking to these towns and the county and communities. Town of Avon is an example where he was asked to go in and present to a town council meeting because, needless to say, to the question at the back, there's a lot of communities, including a lot of elected officials, who are asking exactly that question, like if we do all this code stuff, is the grid going to collapse and like we're going to lose our seat at the next election because we're going to get blamed. So what our CEO has been doing is communicating, sort of over-communicating in a way, but being intentionally out there, which I think is important. And then in terms of the specific message, what he's been saying is that, and we do like 10-year forecasting, by the way, but things are moving so fast, it's getting difficult. So what his message is we can, in our estimation, cope with increases in demand from building electrification. Obviously EVs is another big piece of it, offset by solar, because if you put solar on your roof, that means less we supply. His point to these meetings is we can cope with this as long as you can help us in 2 ways. Like one is give us like advance notice of what you're doing. So like if this isn't going to happen, but like hypothetically, if you build 1,000 homes and like phone up and say, can we connect this now? And you haven't told us about it, it's sort of a problem from like a grid planning point of view. And we're doing a lot more internally to like interact with developers and towns and whatever to get heads up. And then the other thing, which touches on the 3rd bullet, is like we're encouraging people to advance the use of storage to basically help us buffer renewables. And I would add 1 point to that if I was editing it, which is to say, like most people currently think about storage as a way to reduce peak demand, and we do that, it saves us like millions of bucks a year. The other thing that we're like close to doing now is using storage the other way around. We haven't really effectuated it, but the point is, like we've got a 200 megawatt wind farm on the Eastern Plains. The wind blows strongest at night. Demand is lowest at the night. So what we want to do is find ways, whether it's our utility scale batteries or the battery in your garage, to store stuff at night. So it's not just about reducing heat, it's about absorbing like what would otherwise be excess renewable production. So I'll stop there.
Lots of great work happening at Holy Cross. I encourage you to talk to Ed afterwards if you want to learn more. Any other questions on where we landed with this? I guess the one other point that I will make here is that the state of Colorado in 2021 passed legislation that said all communities, when they update their building code, have to put in place an electric-ready code. Electric readiness means that if you put gas in your building, you have to wire and provide enough panel capacity and transformer capacity for the future electrification of that building. And so because that is now a minimum code standard across the state of Colorado, it also drove the conversation on that first bullet right here. and the conversations around net zero and what we actually mean and what we're trying to achieve. Cool. So now we're going to talk about the roadmap. This is, again, to highlight the goal of, like, part of this project is we wanted to show communities and help staff and building code officials understand from how they get to point A, where they are right now, to this end goal, and how can they do so with a logical, stepped approach that they could integrate through each of their future code adoption cycles. So our roadmap is broken into the following categories. It's really focused on energy. Like I said, we didn't touch embodied carbon. It's also is part of that state minimum code requirement for Colorado. They also require EV readiness as part of that, which is also how this got in our definition. Our roadmap topic areas was electrification, also thinking about exemptions or exceptions to electrification, energy storage, energy efficiency, demand response, and renewable energy. And to Adam's point, I just wanted to highlight for this energy storage and demand response piece, this is a space where I think the sustainability folks, the building code folks, this is pretty new. For anyone who's following the IECC codes, they just this year in the 2024 IECC added appendices to touch on demand response and energy storage. But before that, they really haven't shown up in building code, so they're pretty new topics. And so as we approached these topics, we met specifically, we had a couple of calls with Holy Cross, Excel, Glenwood Springs, and Aspen Electric to say, how are these technologies part of your future plan to get to 100? Or how are they part of your current efforts to maintain your 100% renewable energy supply? And so what was added in the roadmap for these was really a reflection of those conversations. So this is our roadmap. This is in the handout. We actually have it broken out by residential and commercial, but for simplicity's sake, we combine them today. So I'm just going to orient you guys really quick, and I'm going to step back so I can see it. So we have our topics here on the side. The next slide will cover solar. And then, again, like we said, we wanted to develop a stepped approach. So we didn't want communities to feel through this effort that they were going to go from their current code to this all-electric net zero code in the next code adoption cycle. We also know that Colorado, because it's a home rule state, some communities go they update their code every 3 years. Some communities update their code every 6 years. Some communities never update their code. It is a mixed bag, and you really don't know what you're going to get. And so we wanted to make sure that as we were building out this roadmap, we were accommodating the different local governments in their different approaches to adopting energy code. We're not saying here, okay, everybody, you have to change from your 6-year cycle to a 3-year cycle. We're just saying, take a look at this, these steps, and there's a suggested time frame. So like if you're updating your code between now and 2026, we think you should look at step A. So on and so forth. The other thought we had was, or the other, I guess, purpose of this was to say, okay, if you are adopting your code in 2024, but you want to go all the way to step C, you can do that. Like we wanted to make sure that this was flexible because of the unique nature of Colorado codes and how they all are so different. So, looking through this, I'll try to fly through this quickly. On the energy efficiency line item, so starting out with adopting the 2021 or the 2024 IECC and the required electric and solar ready code. So again, that code is electric ready, solar ready, EV ready, required for all new buildings. Step B would be to adopt the next state code. So I'm sorry, I feel like I missed the context from the state code, so I'm catching up a bit. This current state minimum code is in place right now. In 2026, there will be a new low energy and carbon code that will be required as a minimum for communities to adopt. State of Colorado, rather than saying this is the code everyone must adopt, they said once you update a code, if it falls in this time frame, you have to move at a minimum to this energy standard. So that's kind of how Colorado did it, which is a little different than other states. And then once we get to 2030 and beyond, adopting the most recent IECC. Home size was a big thing, and this is really for residential. We have a unique issue in our region where we have homes, well, maybe not unique to the crowd we have here. We have homes that are 50,000 square feet and above. And so there was certain interest in making sure that as we advance codes that those really big energy hogs have to do more to reduce their overall energy consumption. Yeah?
Not to interrupt, is there any way to address lesser restrictions for really small homes, tiny homes, and units under 1,000 square feet, for instance?
You mean like scaling back requirements for those? So we had some conversations, we did spend some time focusing on like equity and affordability through this process. And I think the key message that I took away is that we don't want the affordable housing to be stuck with the highest energy bills, right? If you have this 25,000 square foot home that's required to be net zero, they might not have an energy bill. If you reduce insulation efficiency requirements for a small home, you know, what's the outcome of that could be that those occupants are then paying higher energy bills for the life of that building. And so it was trying to balance that upfront cost with, do we want to strap the lowest income members of our community with higher costs for energy. On to electrification, hot topic. Currently right now, in Eagle County, a lot of our communities, and across Bacon County, have an electric preferred code. What that means is if you build all electric, you have to do slightly less efficiency or slightly less solar on your roof. Electric readiness is part of that, so again, you have to have the pre-wiring, you have to have the panel capacity, and you have to have the transformer capacity for all of your building systems to be electrified. And so that's step A, is just kind of getting some uniformity around showing and stating to the building industry and our communities that we prefer electric codes. Step B would be moving to all electric with exceptions for gas supplemental heat, emergency generators, or really any other thing that the building code official or jurisdiction deems appropriate for that community. And then finally, when we get to step C, we're really trying to dial in all electric buildings with limited or rare exceptions, except in the case where we might have industry. Yeah?
Not from an industry standpoint, there's no more battery storage technologies today for backup if you have an outage. Now, I've got power walls, right? I would have to fill my house with power walls to last for a week of an outage. That's why people get a diesel generator. In the corporate world, you have a requirement for continuity of business. You're going to get sued by your shareholders or by your regulators into your bank if your data center or whatever shuts down because of a power outage and you don't have backup. You go that route, they can't meet that requirement.
So I do want to share, when we say emergency generators, again, that could be an exception that somebody builds in here. We are lucky that Holy Cross and Excel, I mean, outages are very rare in our area, knock on wood, but that doesn't change. I also think it's important to note that if there's a power outage, your natural gas furnace or boiler is also not going to work. And so, it is true.
It depends on the power outage, right?
If it's an electric power outage, those systems
They will
will not
have
work.
their own backup for that reason.
Right, so I guess this is, again, we are moving into uncharted territory, and the idea here is not to leave anybody stranded or less in a place that's risk. Absolutely. Absolutely, and I think the building code officials in our region saw that concern and were very intentional about making sure that both of these set with exceptions and as decided by the building code officials.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing too. These asterisks here were specifically put in to remind us to revisit those battery storage requirements that we have planned for step B and step C to assess where the current level of that is with our electric utility at the time. So that's some additional flexibility that was built in, knowing that it's a newer technology, it may go faster, it might go a little bit slower than we expect, so we have that sort of contingency built in. Thanks, Karen.
So on the energy storage side, many of you guys might be familiar with the REMP program. Has anyone heard of REMP? I know my Colorado crew may have. So basically REMP and EEOP, or Exterior Energy Offset, are these programs to try to tackle exterior energy use from snowmelt, pools, spas, heat tape, gas fireplaces, etc. And so within those programs, if you put in a snowmelt system or if you put in a pool, you have the opportunity to offset that with solar on your site, or you can pay a fee, which goes to the community nonprofits in the region to support future energy efficiency work. So for energy storage, right now, in these first few steps of our roadmap, it would be to incentivize battery storage through these programs as an option for folks. If they don't want to put solar on the roof, they could do battery, they could do both, to lower that fee. And then as we move forward in the roadmap, requiring energy storage as tied to new PV systems. And this was another thing that we coordinated very closely with the utility. We have heard that the utilities prefer, if you're going to put solar on your roof, that you have a battery to help manage your own load. So you're not just shedding that solar right back onto the grid when there's already a lot of oversaturation of renewables during those peak times. So that's how we integrated energy storage. On demand response, nothing required in step A. We don't really feel like it's that baked of an idea or a technology yet. In step B, it would be required for electric water heaters, and this is actually following Colorado state law that requires electric, residential, and small commercial water heaters to have demand response controls integrated in them. So that was really just an alignment with Colorado law, and then as we move into 2030, adding demand responsive controls with thermostats. And I also want to clarify, when we're talking about demand response, this is all opt-in demand response. This would not be saying you put these controls in your house and the utility can turn your power off whenever they want. This would be a opt-in, but having the ability to communicate. Your building can communicate with the utility. Okay, and then the last one here is solar. So I think this was a really interesting, I guess this was a really interesting topic with this group because we had two sort of fundamental different approaches to net zero across our two valleys. This is the Roaring Fork River Valley, this is the Eagle River Valley. The first in Roaring Fork is that some of the communities over in the Roaring Fork Valley require solar as part of their current building codes. On some residential and then for commercial. On the Eagle County side, there are consistency in solar readiness is required across the board, but solar is not required across the board. I think the just sort of general net zero approaches between the two communities differ. One was saying you can build whatever you want, put solar on the roof. Eagle County was saying try to build all electric and use the renewable energy coming from the grid. So as we were looking at how we get everybody on the same page with solar, this was a hard conversation to have. Because again, we're aiming for that regional alignment and alignment with what our utilities are looking for. So in step A and B, we're sort of stepping down the solar requirement for the folks that have it in place. So this would be trying to use that on-site renewable energy to offset whatever remaining fossil fuel is powering the electric grid. On the Eagle County side, for the first two steps, it's just keeping solar readiness. For this mid-year step, if solar is installed, energy storage would be required to be paired with it. And then when we get to 2030, we're requiring solar ready. Solar is optional, so if a homeowner wants to put solar on the roof, they are absolutely allowed to do so. And then the code would say if you have, ideally if you have solar installed, you're putting in a battery to back it up. Again, I want to highlight Kira's point that we have these little asterisks here and in the previous slide, and really the intention was like, this is our best guess at this point in time with these technologies and our current utility programming. Everything could change in 3 years because things change a lot in this space. And so the idea here is that we are flagging these to say, we need to come back and check in on this before the next code adoption. We're not just going to blindly follow this roadmap that we built in 2024 in 2028 if everything has changed, right? So the idea here is building in those checkpoints with the communities. Okay. Is this me? Is this you? Is this you? Okay, so, me? Okay. You can tell we really rehearsed this before. Again, one of those goals that was part of this project was to foster ongoing collaboration amongst our building code departments and our sustainability staff, and also, I would say, we hope, our elected officials as they start to move forward this roadmap. And so the question we needed to ask ourselves is how do we continue to work together as a region? And so a foundational part of the project was making sure that we were working with existing community-based organizations, Rocky Mountains, Core, and Clear, so that they could continue this work once the consultants had left. That was really, really important because these are trusted organizations that our local governments look to for all sustainability and climate-related work. The other thing we wanted to make sure we were doing is looking at ongoing grant funding opportunities, and like I said, the state of Colorado has some really great grant funds available for ongoing building code adoption and support, and so leveraging those to to basically bring in funding to continue this collaboration and make sure that that there is somebody to organize the communities again when they want to update codes again in 2027. And then something more that is ongoing, because this project is not quite over, is working to coordinate and collect shared resources. And so one thing that I learned through this project is that our building code officials didn't know each other, weren't really talking to each other, didn't know that each other had these different unique things in their code, didn't know that, oh, Pitkin County's been dealing with home size for the last 10 years. Maybe one of our other communities could learn from that, right? So it was kind of like whoa, nobody's talking. Maybe we can fix that. And so, some of the resources that were identified is like, how can we align on energy storage standards? Who's enforcing performance approaches in the code? Like, is that the route we want to go? Can we learn lessons from that? Who has home size variances in place and how those work? So just really, again, trying to share resources and lesson across our community. And then I was going to offer, Kira, did you have any thoughts to share on the importance of ongoing collaboration?
Yeah, I just want to add to that first point, to work through those community-based organizations, because you're really also leveraging your town's financial resources, right? So if you want to bring in a consultant to help you and other towns near you to support this work, your $5,000 goes way further with all those other folks on board, especially if it's funneled through a trusted source, like for us was Walking Mountains and the Climate Action Collaborative. We signed on to their climate action plan long before we even set our own net zero goals, and the board of that group has recognized there's so much value in that regional collaboration, and so we already had that existing structure in place that really helped, with trust, helped our elected officials trust that, this was a good path forward, trust that we have experts in the room, and trust that our neighbors are signing on to the same thing that we are.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question about that? Could you just expand on that origin story a little bit and tell us, so who had the idea to actually bring this coalition together and then bring on the consultant to do this? I don't think I really followed that from the beginning.
I believe that it started with the Eagle County Code cohort. That was sort of the first iteration before we moved on to the Net Zero Roadmap effort. And Kim, if you want to explain a little bit more history.
It was Walking Mountains, the nonprofit based in the Eagle River Valley, that started the code cohort work. And I'll say, I work for Lotus, but I am intimately involved in the community. I used to work for Walking Mountains before I moved to Lotus, and so there was that connection was already in place. Lotus had done a code cohort in Boulder County, and so Eagle County and Walking Mountains wanted to bring that to Eagle County. That's how we got the first cohort, and then Walking Mountains, I give credit entirely to Gina McCracken, who could not be at this conference, who pastored CEO to give us basically $3 to work on this project. So it was all led by the nonprofits.
Walking Mountains is, for those of us who don't know?
Walking Mountains is a community nonprofit. They do nature and science education, but also manage all of the zero waste in the Eagle River Valley. They manage the Climate Action Collaborative. They manage an actively green business certification, and they do a lot.
Energy Smart rebates.
Energy Smart. They facilitate all the Energy Smart audits and rebates. Yeah, they're an impressive bunch. Yeah.
Hi, you might think this is off topic, and if so, sincerely ignore it. But arguably, the most climate-friendly thing any town or city can do, housing-wise, is just to build more, denser housing so that the people who work there don't have to commute from cheaper places far away. And I've noticed over the years that a lot of people, let's say in our demographic, love the idea of fancy, zero carbon, new homes, but will show up with placards shouting if you try to build an apartment building next to their house. So I just wondered, in any of these discussions, did NIMBYism come up, and did simply building more denser housing come up, and not just sprawling zero carbon mansions?
quick answer is no. I think we were really focused on trying to make sure that we're stopping the climate problem with new construction and not trying to, not building homes that then we're going to have to go back and retrofit 10 years later to make carbon neutral. But I think that that's a very important issue that I think is not, touches a lot of what we do in this space. I will say there's some really great case studies. Clear has worked on a couple of affordable housing net zero all electric projects in Garfield County. There's a Basalt Vista is a housing complex in, which county is it in? It's in the River Valley that has all the counties. Okay, in Eagle. That is a super awesome project, and then Town of Avon also has a couple of all electric net zero affordable housing complexes as well. And so I guess all to say that these standards are not just built for the McMansions of Vail and Aspen and Pitkin County, but they are also really trying to dial in. And there have been very clear successes in affordable housing projects applying these principles. I saw this hand and now I'll go over here.
Just curious, do you differentiate between electric resistance, so not very efficient electric, and high efficiency electric systems? Because it seems like that's a drastic difference both in the electric load and in environmental outcomes.
That's a really fantastic point. In this roadmap, we don't make that distinction, but in building codes themselves, we would aim to make that distinction. I think the problem is DOE regulates minimum efficiencies, and electric resistance is allowed as part of meeting the base building code. And so I think that's an ongoing challenge. But there are a lot of case studies out there, a lot of affordable housing folks that have done heat pumps and had success there. So that's an ongoing challenge, yeah. I don't have a great answer for that. Just give me 1 second, there was a question over here.
That's Sonia Macy's, Route County Commissioner. So Route County, Colorado is the neighbor to these communities. We did just regulate home sizes. So I'm wondering, you mentioned Pitkin County, but did other communities within the set regulate home sizes as a part of this exercise?
So not yet. So as a reminder, this is sort of our roadmap for future code adoption. So this was all really at the planning phase, and then once we get to each code cycle, it would be the question of what are other people doing and how do we integrate those requirements in. So I think it's just Pitkin County in our region. City of Boulder, Boulder County, Mountain Village, and Telluride all also have home size requirements, I know, but those aren't quite in our region. So not yet, but soon. Yeah.
I have a question, but just to follow up to that, I don't have all the details, but a resource could be Jesse Burley with Town of Breckenridge. Breckenridge is also doing a lot with its workforce housing and is making sure that it is both, that it is all electric and in many cases has solar on top of it. They have a project called Alta Verde. The first phase of it was built with heat pumps. The second phase, the developer modeled and decided that they were going to build a super solid envelope and they put in electric resistance heat. It was higher efficiency electric resistance, but during their modeling, they showed they could do it more affordably and have a similar outcome. So she might be a good resource for that. The town didn't build it, they hired a developer, but that is one example of where that's been done. Kim, my question for you was about the pathways. For the electric preferred, are the communities adopting an appendix in the existing code to have that electric preferred check, to accomplish that, or are they doing their own electric preferred code?
So I will just say we are almost out of time, so I'm going to answer this very quickly and then happy to answer any other questions. There are specific amendments to the 2021 code that build in the electric preferred elements. So electric readiness was added into the base code of the IECC, and then there were changes to each pathway. So for example, in the residential prescriptive pathway, instead of having to do one efficiency package, if you built with natural gas, you only do 3 efficiency packages. So it was integrated into the code. And then I think we just had one more super fast slide that I wanted to share. So replication, I feel like the whole point of this is how can I do this in my community and work with collaborators? For the folks who are neighbors with these communities in Colorado, would love to know your ideas about advancing this and building this region to be even bigger. But for those who are in other states, what climate goals can you guys rally around with your neighbors? What structures or partnerships or nonprofits, community-based organizations can you leverage? Who are the technical code experts in your state? Or the nonprofits who could help write and advise on codes? How can you fund technical consultants or nonprofits to support you? And then are your building code officials on board? And I think the one thing that I wanted to add for those who are state code folks is, you might not be able to align on a minimum code, but could you align on incentives to go above code and what that above code looks like, right? So like, how can we take this from Colorado where it's a messy code environment and apply it to where there's uniform code?